Good morning. Today we look at Isaiah chapters 3 and 4. And, Isaiah is bringing a word from God to the people. And chapter 3 begins not very good news at all. It says, "For now the sovereign, the Lord of hosts, is taking away from Jerusalem, Judah, support and staff, all support of bread, all support of water, warrior, soldier, judge, prophet, diviner, elder, captain of 50, taking away all the leadership, leaving them, without somebody to guide them, without proper protection, without anybody with experience, and I will make boys their princes," it says in verse 4. I mean, so all of these officers, all of these people that are necessary for the stability, of the Jewish nation are going to be gone. And it's going to be ruled by, people with no experience. And when that happens, what happens when you have people with no experience, people with, we have unrest, we have riots, we have, violence going on because these people that are going to be in leadership don't know what to do. And so everything goes to pot. And this is what's going to happen in Jerusalem. Civil unrest is coming about. And then they're going to be overtaken by other countries as well. And, the end of verse 5, "The youth will be insolent to the elder, and the base to the honorable." It's just, there won't be any respect for people with wisdom, with knowledge, with any leadership. They're not going to listen. Not going to listen. And someone will seize a relative and say, "You have a cloak, you shall be our leader." They're going to raise up anybody, whether they have experience or not, whether they want to or not, whether, there's just, verse 8, "Jerusalem has stumbled, Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds go against the Lord." It just baffles me, and I'm sure you too, that, how can these people not listen to God? How can these people not understand that following God is the right thing to do? But, how many people have we got in the world today that don't listen to God, don't follow God, say that God is irrelevant, and want to go on their own way, "Oh, that doesn't pertain to me. I can get along fine on my own." But, it doesn't happen that way. So these first 8 verses of chapter 3 talk about the disorder, the civil unrest, the lack of leadership, and all of these things that come into being for Israel. And then verse 9, "The look on their faces bears witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. They brought an evil on themselves." And so they, sin doesn't mean anything, and they go on saying, and I remember, growing up, mom and dad had some rules, and you tried your best to follow them. You didn't just say, "They don't know anything, I'm going to do whatever I want." No. And this is society. This is what Isaiah is saying to the people. You are ignoring everything that God has set forth before you. And it doesn't matter. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. And we remember what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sinful living, because they just didn't hear God. They didn't heed God. They just couldn't come about to say, "We are sinners and we need to change." They lived in it, and they reveled in it, actually. They enjoyed living in their sin. Verse 11, "Woe to the guilty! How unfortunate they are, for what their hands have done shall be done to them." And karma. You get what's coming to you. Same thing happens to you. And he says, "My people, children are their oppressors. Women rule over them. O my people, your leaders mislead you and confuse the course of your paths." You've got nobody with any experience, nobody to properly show you how to do things. Nobody to properly rule over you. And then verse 13 and following, God is going to judge. And the Lord rises to argue his case. He stands to judge the people. He enters into judgment with the elders and the princes. And it is you who have devoured the vineyard. The spoil of the poor is in your houses. You're taking advantage of those others that way. And then verse 15, God says, what do you mean by crushing my people, by grinding the face of the poor? You're just not living the way you should be living. And then, starting in verse 16, God talks about the humiliation that's going to come to the Israelite people. And he uses the image of women, and I don't like that. And if you don't, I don't blame you either. But he says, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks, glancing wantonly about their eyes, mincing their eye, the Lord will affect them with scabs on the heads, and the Lord will lay bare their secret parts. They're going to be humiliated. And I think each and every one of us at some point in time has faced a little bit of humiliation in our lives, or we've been, embarrassed by what we have done. And this is what God said is going to happen to the Israelites. In that day, the Lord will take away the finery, the headbands, the crescents, the pendants. He's going to take away all of that fancy stuff. And it's, in verse 25, your men will fall by the sword, your warriors in battle, and her gates will lament and mourn. God had sworn to the people of Israel, promised them that, he would be with them in battle, but no longer. And their men are going to die in battle. And then what comes about verse 1 of chapter 4, 7 women will take one man. It's because there are no men, because there's a shortage. All the men have died in battle. And they just don't know, how else to survive and how to, when there are no men, it's really hard for the women to conceive and bear children. And so, they band together because all of the men have died in battle. This is a part of the humiliation that God is saying that is going to come to Israel. But then starting at verse 2 is the restoration of Jerusalem, the promise from God again. On that day, the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious. The fruit of the land shall be pride and glory of the survivors of Israel. Whoever is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy. And so, again, God will come to the aid of the people, and he will restore them. And maybe partly of it is that the people come to their senses and realize that, following God is the right thing to do. Verse 5, the Lord shall create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over the place of assembly a cloud by day and smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night. Again, here, just like as God led the people of Israel out of Egypt, out of slavery, by the pillar of fire and cloud at night, and by the pillar of smoke during the day, this is the presence of God will be with the people again. The promise of restoration is such an important part of the Israelites' journey in faith. And, and part of, when we look back at this Old Testament, at the people of Israel following God, they're learning. They're not sure. They have their growing pains. They have their time of adolescent rebellion, kind of more or less. But it doesn't only last just a few years of adolescence, but it's a time of the Israelites growing in their faith and trust in God, coming to believe that God is leading and guiding, and having leaders that follow God as well. And that's, any time and every time, as you remember, as we read through 1st and 2nd Kings and those books back there, that when the leaders didn't follow God, it didn't go so well for the people. So it's just another example of, following God is really the right thing to do.